Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I'm back. And it's currently 1 a.m. my time, but I'm recording right now because it's the only time I can record. Okay, that was not normally how my intros go, but I am pretty amped up right now because I'm excited to be back for part 2 of What If Deku Had an Artist Quirk. I've actually kind of enjoyed this series a lot. Don't worry, the Saiyan Deku's still gonna go on. I'm gonna finish both of these kind of around the same time. But I seen that some of y'all really enjoyed it. I know it was a more unique idea in terms of quirks, so I'm glad to see that y'all enjoyed it. And be ready for some bangers, man. I'm coming up with some ideas. I'm thinking about some ideas. I have some stuff ready to go. On top of that, I want to do a Halloween special. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that. I don't know. I need to get the timing on that proper. So I'll try to do that the best of my abilities. But I also have new Naofumi what ifs in the back of my head, in the back of the storage, as you could say it. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff we got going on, but we're here for part 2 of What If Deku Had an Artist Quirk. So let's get right where we left off, and that's where that's the UA entrance exam. So let's get right into it. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya would sprint out right when the gates would swing open. Everybody would say that he's some sort of cheater, but that is not the truth. Izuku would continue to run as he begins to bring out his journal, whipping out his journal and sending this image out onto the surface. Izuku made a 3D image of one of his favorite things he's seen from one of his animes, and that is the flying Nimbus. The flying Nimbus in this regard would just be a flying cloud. It's not like you need some pure hearts, but at the same time, Izuku, I'm sure, does have the closest thing to a pure heart, so it wouldn't be too difficult even if those stipulations did rely. Nonetheless, Izuku would go racing off at insane speeds, or at least faster than the mass majority of the people there. Maybe people like Tenya Ida would be faster than him, but he begins to fight robots, finding them and eventually hitting them with certain weapons that he creates through, well, his journal. These weapons would include swords, spears, and stuff like that. Anything that would be a projectile as well. And he's actually able to send insane amounts of projectiles off of different pages as well. He drew up flaming arrows, so he would open up his journal as flaming arrows would rain from the skies, destroying the robots below at insane velocities. Of course, he would have some other complicated things within his journal, but some of that stuff is extremely difficult to use. On top of this, he begins to sketch something very simple, nothing insane, but a version of the robots that he's currently fighting. He whips out his pen and pencil and begins to draw really fast as humanly possible, and he summons that said robot. He sends the robot down, and the robot begins to punch holes through robot after robot, and Izuku begins to get slightly tired out. But that is also why he summoned the Flying Nimbus, something that he can fly around on that wouldn't drain his stamina through running. This is kind of a precaution Izuku kept in mind, because let's just say if he gets too tired out, at least the Flying Nimbus can bring him to a safe spot and he won't have to worry about it, which is a pretty good and non-oversight by Izuku. He would continue to destroy robots with a relative easy fashion, but everyone began to catch up. Robot after robot was beginning to get destroyed, and Izuku felt like he was somewhere at the top, but definitely not number one. All the destruction of robots has definitely made him somewhat confident about what he's been able to do, especially with the quirk he has. Well, think about it. It might be creativity that is the only thing limiting him, but the stamina withdrawal or the stamina drawback with his quirk is definitely a hit. He was able to summon a ton of things, but that's kind of where it ended. He had to stop and slow down so that he can recover some stamina. Luckily, his stamina recovery time is relatively quick with all the training he's been up to. He continues to go around picking off anything he possibly can, using a couple animals on top of the robot that he already has with his journal. But a lot of these animals aren't full animals, being that some are 2D images, so it's kind of odd when they're flying around. They're kind of just a flat image flying towards something, or at least a frontal view of it, but it still has the same impact of a regular animal. Let's say a 2D tiger goes flying at, well, a robot, it would get bit into just like a tiger would bite. So it's able to actually be beneficial, but a 3D version of a tiger, which is kind of, well, you know, how it's supposed to be, would be far more beneficial than what he's currently using at the moment. With that said though, he did pretty well, and just as he believes it to be over, the 0 Point robot would finally arrive. But the 0 Point robot is far different than anything he's actually seen. All of these other robots, they're tiny, small, very minuscule compared to this robot, a giant robot. A robot that is towering over tons and tons of buildings. This is something to fear, something to definitely be scared of, and Izuku wouldn't necessarily say he's terrified of it, but he's scared of, well, making a mistake. So he decides to fly away as soon as possible, not wanting to drain his stamina any further and get caught underneath that giant behemoth. But what he didn't notice was a girl screaming for help. At the last moment, he would hear just a glimmer and a little bit of the voice that this girl has. It was Ochako Uraka, someone that he's already met. He begins to think that this is what a real hero would do. He can't just let her die. Immediately, he begins to flip through his pages, flip as quick as possible, trying to find something, maybe anything, as he finds something. A prototype, something he wrote up that was very similar to a support item, a bubble of some sorts that could protect anything from outside attacks. But would that really work against a giant robot? He's not so sure, but he continues to further the drawing as the robot charges toward the girl, and he immediately swings it out toward her. And the 3D image of this giant bubble covers the girl as the robot stomps on top of it. The bubble bends, but it does not break. It then reflects back toward the robot, slinging him off balance and slamming him into the ground. The robot would fall over, not completely destroyed because, it was just a protective bubble, but Izuku sighs in relief, and all the teachers and all the professors and people there that are currently watching, pro heroes alike, are completely shocked. On the fly, that kid was able to do that. What does he not have up his sleeve? Izuku, like I said, is limited only by creativity. Izuku's creativity is off the charts, but his stamina currently isn't. Unfortunately, that's kind of the only thing holding him back, and they would love to talk to Izuku as soon as possible, but he's kind of taking a bit of a nap. So Izuku would be taken away by the flying Nimbus as he gets taken away to Recovery Girl by some other teachers. The teachers would wait for him to awaken, and when he would, Izuku would ask how long it's been, but they say it's only been about an hour. Shota Aizawa, and Nezu introduce themselves, saying that they are, one is a teacher at UA and the other is the principal. Izuku asks if he's in trouble, and of course they say no, that is not the case. They say that whatever he just did was extremely impressive, and his fast thinking skills are kind of on the fly. Izuku explains that his journal has a ton of precautions that he takes into measure, but of course he cannot think of every last thing, but creativity is something that he's pretty good at, so he tries to think outside the box. They ask if a robot was really in his plans, and he shakes his head, saying that the protective bubble was just something that was able to reflect. Maybe if they were shooting bullets or something like that, he would be able to reflect it back toward them, but it's a prototype like he said, and he's not sure if he can actually use it ever again. They ask why, and he explains that it takes insane amounts of concentration to actually make something that specific, and that's why he passed out. Plus, the image and the image of it was not very detailed, so in his own mind, he had to create the rest of it, which in turn made him pass out instantaneously. On top of the other, loss of stamina, it kind of ended up this way. But Izuku makes an assumption that even without any loss of stamina, he might have passed out. It was too complex, and the technology was too complex for him to do it. They ask if they can take the bubble in and check it out. It is a protective bubble at that, and maybe there's something useful. But Izuku says that they can try. He has no idea how that would work because, frankly, a lot of his quirk is still kind of unknown to him. But he tells him to feel free to give it their best shot because you never know, it could work out. Izuku would then eventually start leaving. But of course they would stop him and tell him that he did a really good job and that he should be expecting a letter very, very, very soon. Izuku, of course, is happy to hear this. He wants to get into UA extremely bad, and this would be his next step. Eventually, the letter would come and arrive to his house. A letter would turn into a hologram, and that hologram would be All Might himself. All Might would speak to Izuku through the hologram, telling him exactly of the amazing things he's did and the amount of points he got. Yes, he might have only gotten about 60 to 70 robot points, but he got even more points from saving that girl. That girl herself even tried to give points to him, but of course he was just fine in points and he made it into UA. But not only that, not only didn't he make it to UA, he got in with flying colors as the #1 student in the entrance exam. Izuku is shocked to hear this, but excited at the same time, even texting Momo relatively quickly about the occurrence. During this time, they've become extremely good friends, and there was some, good luck exchanges, especially before the entrance exam even began, and of course Momo got into UA just like normal. Some time would eventually pass, and it's time for the first day of UA. Izuku would be thrilled, excited, and ready for the challenge. As he walks into the door, he sees his friend, rival, not really friend, kind of enemy, Bakugo, yelling at a kid with blue hair. Izuku just tends to ignore these things and just heads to his seat. He continues to draw more and more while he waits for Aizawa, their teacher, to finally show up. And eventually he would, in the midst of a girl walking up to Izuku and speaking to him. Both actually Momo and Ochako walk up at the same time. Unfortunately, they're cut off relatively quickly because Aizawa walks in and tells them to basically shut the F up and sit down, because they have far more important things to do than just chat. Aizawa tells them that they'll be taking a bit of a test. Some will question what about orientation, but he says that he doesn't care about anything like that, that they've been praised far enough, so it doesn't necessarily matter. Aizawa tells them all to meet him outside in their gym uniforms or their workout uniforms and get ready for a bit of a quirk assessment test, in which they all head out, and Aizawa would call up Izuku first, telling him that, his quirk is very creative, raw in power, it is not, but there is something to think about. And he questions what Aizawa wants him to do, and all he says is throw this ball. Like, by any means. Do whatever I want, just throw it as far as possible. Aizawa nods, confirming this, and Izuku looks in his journal, flipping to a page relatively quickly as he creates something, putting something on the ball, as when he chucks it, it begins to just float, higher and higher and higher. Of course, Aizawa questions what the hell he just did, and Izuku kind of explains that he sort of injected it with helium. It's kind of hard to explain, but he made the ball lighter, he made it so it can float, and now it's gone into the space. So he gets infinity, of course, but Izuku has come up with little things like this as if it were a simple gadget, and since it's a small item like a literal baseball, it was relatively easy to do. Bigger things would be a good bit harder. He actually got this idea from, ironically enough, Ochako Araka, the one that kind of saved him from face planting, but it was also because he saw construction workers working and carrying heavy items, thinking that maybe there's some sort of device he could make to make them float. Luckily, with smaller items, it's far easier than way larger items like big old metal beams or, stuff like that, like metal pillars, so it was easier to make the ball float. Aizawa is pretty impressed, asking if he truly has everything or every needed thing in that notebook, at least for every scenario, and how long would it actually take him to find it. Izuku says he definitely doesn't have every situation, that would be just impossible, but he can find it relatively quickly. He's able to search through his notebook relatively fast, just from memory, knowing kind of where everything is. Plus, he kind of has his own table of contents. He says he knows it sounds nerdy, but he was able to memorize it, so he knows exactly the page, or at least the vicinity certain things are. And Aizawa, again, is pretty impressed, not telling him straight out, but definitely thinking that Izuku is something different in terms of being a hero. He then calls up Bakugo, or Akatsuki Bakugo, in which Bakugo tries to replicate some crazy feats, but he's not able to. Of course, he's not able to throw at infinity. He's able to do something good in his own regard, but he's still kind of pissed off. Izuku's been hiding all of this? How much is he able to do? How strong truly is he? Can he really maybe even make himself into a crazy good fighter using these so-called drawings? This begins to piss off Bakugo as he goes charging at Izuku as if he has no regard for anything. And of course Aizawa is about to stop this, but Izuku himself stops it himself. Oh, obviously. He then pulls out his journal, pushing his pen across a piece of paper, and it somehow turns into this 2D flat image of really nothing. It looks like just a weirdly drawn rug, and Izuku just wraps Bakugo in that said rug. Everybody is confused, asking what the hell he just used, and he literally says that it was just a rug. It was as if it was just some sort of blanket, but this blanket is extremely heavy, and it's only a 2D image because it's something he's drawn before, just this straight up square-like image, and it really just wrapped around Bakugo pretty easily, in which they're all kind of shocked about this. So he wrapped him in a piece of paper, in which he says that's technically true, I guess, but this piece of paper is extremely strong. Just through creativity, he's able to make it extremely durable, so it's not like Bakugo would have been able to just blast through it as if they were cutting through paper. Bakugo is a bit frustrated, but Aizawa says that another stunt like that would send him home forever, and that he'd never get into UA ever again, and that he would have to go somewhere else. And it would be hard as hell to do that, especially with everyone already enrolled in their own specific high schools. Bakugo calms down and makes sure that he's not going to do that again, because let's just be honest, that is idiotic for him to make that same mistake twice, but at the same time is a Bakugo thing to do. But all the other stuff continues to go on, all of the assessments and so on and so forth. And of course, they would think that this would be so much fun, and they would get the extra motivation from Aizawa to try harder when he says that the last place will get kicked out. And it ends up not being true, but Izuku is able to relatively do well in all of the rest of the events, and Izuku would come out on top relatively easily as well, and it would be a bit of a landslide. He has practically a certain picture or something like that for every single event, so it wouldn't be too difficult for Izuku to absolutely destroy the competition, and that's exactly what he would do, being number one in their little quirk assessment test. Aizawa is impressed, of course, as always. He's seen a lot from Izuku so far, and far more from him than anybody else. That would finally finish, and it would conclude the quirk assessment test. They would be allowed to go to orientation, even though there's practically no time left within orientation, but they would still be allowed to head off. Aizawa would dismiss everybody, and the next day they'd truly start their hero training. Izuku and Momo would actually walk to school this day, speaking about what they believe is going to happen and occur, saying that it would be good to get some actual hero training in, and Izuku wants that especially because he needs to know if he can truly use his quirk practically. And he would get that chance when All Might comes in the room saying, "I am here," saying that he will now take them all out, and they will be doing some hero versus villain training. This training will consist of a couple things. After Izuku gets on his hero outfit, and everyone does as well, they would speak to All Might. All Might would explain that there would be a hero team. There will be 2 on the hero team and 2 on the villain team, but this will be a bit of a spar. And yes, he could do some practical stuff, but he wants to see what they have on the base level. He wants to see if they can fight. He wants to see if sparring and going one-on-one with their classmates benefits them overall. So he'll do just that. He'll be putting Izuku Midoriya and Momo Yaoyorozu versus Katsuki Bakugo and Ochako Uraraka. And this will be the first fight. Bakugo is extremely excited. I mean, he wants revenge on Izuku. He wants to make sure that he can assert his dominance to show how much better he is at everything. Izuku knowing that it doesn't really matter what Bakugo thinks, and on top of that, he just needs to come up with a bit of a plan. And 5 minutes is what they would be given to get that plan. Bakugo, being the way he is, he won't even try to make a plan with Ochako, and he would just try to brute force his way out of it. Izuku and Momo would strategize a perfect plan and look through the entire journal that Izuku has. Having certain things and different ways of going about it, Izuku does have some detainment weapons or detainment ways of stopping Bakugo, but he also has something else. They could try something relatively interesting, which will definitely be something fun. Izuku begins to tear out a piece of paper that he currently has. It's actually of an animal of some sorts. This tiger-like animal, but at the same time it looks like a different version of a tiger. Izuku says that he's seen it from some mythological book. He doesn't know much about it, but he's extremely fascinated by it. So he tells Momo that he has a bit of an idea and something that they could definitely do. And he explains exactly what will occur, and she says that she can definitely play her part. It shouldn't be too difficult. So they get ready, and after the 5 minutes pass, he obviously takes the paper that he just tore out, and he gives it to Momo. Momo creates, a copier, some sort of machine that can copy a bunch of these same pictures, and she does just that. After doing that, they scatter the papers on the ground. Izuku says that he doesn't even need to touch the papers, as he touches the ground itself, and Bakugo and Ochako would come charging in. A ton of these tiger-like mythological creatures would appear out of thin air, it seems, charging toward them in a giant horde. In a matter of seconds, they'd be knocked out, taken down, and, out of the fight. Izuku was able to handle it, but this did make him extremely tired. He would collapse to the ground a little bit, but he wouldn't pass out. Sitting on his butt, he would look toward Momo and kind of smile and scratch the back of his head, saying that he still needs a bit more stamina if he wants to do something that crazy again, but it was definitely something he wanted to try out. And of course, there would be a bit of a lecture from All Might saying that a trump card might be great, something that would guarantee a win. But what happens when that guarantee goes out the window? What happens when that win is no longer guaranteed? If that one move backfires, let's just say Izuku may be going in for a rough day. Izuku can see where he's coming from and understands it, saying that he understands exactly what the risks were of this plan, and says that he knew for a guarantee it would work. And obviously All Might says that it's just something to think about, especially when needing to be more careful in certain scenarios. Izuku agrees, and so does Momo, and they both take home the victory, but obviously they need to work on some stuff and probably avoid doing something that would drain Izuku's stamina entirely. And obviously Izuku would watch the rest of the event, or the people that are training, all of his classmates doing the 2v2s, and he would watch on to see that Shoto Todoroki would be extremely impressive. An extremely impressive person that is only using half of his quirk, which surprises him. Why would he be doing that? That's definitely something to think about. And Izuku would begin drawing Todoroki as it occurs. He's fascinated by his half and half quirk, ice and fire. Now that is something that needs to be thought about. Ice and fire is the perfect balance, but dang, how lucky did they get? What Izuku doesn't realize is there is no luck in that, and that Endeavor, the father of Shoto Todoroki, actually planned it. And unfortunately enough, Shoto isn't going to be in the nicest of moods, especially around everyone else. That would be shown in the next day when they would be going out to do their first rescue training at the USJ. In conversations on the bus over to the USJ, Todoroki would basically give cold glares to everybody, including Izuku. Izuku would try to speak with him, but unfortunately that would never really occur. Momo telling him that it's really fine and to not worry about it. Not everybody is going to want to speak with him, and that's just a matter of fact. And Izuku says that technically, in a technical sense, of course, there is going to be someone that doesn't want to speak with him, but he feels that him and Shoto could get along. But unfortunately, that chance is not going to be right now. Eventually, they would arrive at the USJ. The USJ would be being run by Pro Hero 13, the favorite hero of Ochaku Araka. But here's the thing. this rescue training would turn into something far worse and far more climactic, especially when villains would appear and force Shota Aizawa, their very own teacher, into action. Now, what would happen, or what's going to happen to Izuku and the people there in Class 1A, especially with his brand new Artist Quirk in this scenario? Well, you'll have to find out in the next part of What If Deku Had an Artist Quirk. And we'll be getting into what would happen when the League of Villains arrive on the scene, attacking the USJ and hunt for the one and only All Might. And if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, and make sure to leave a comment down below. All that good stuff, and hope all of you have an amazing day. Later.